What up, Net fans? NetsBoy here, bringing all your latest in your Brooklyn Nets news. However, I am not, if that makes any sense. It's currently early August, and in the off season, there has not been much going on. Greg Oden just agreed to a contract with the Miami Heat, which is going to be interesting to see what happens. Devin Harris officially signed back with the Mavericks. Marcus Camby did something with some team. I actually don't really remember. That's how irrelevant it was. But that's beside the point. That's just what's been going on right now. Before I start my top five shooting guards, which is what this video is, let me address two things. First of all, yes, I did shave. You know, I felt like I was turning too much into a homeless man, and I didn't really think that that was a good look anymore. So I decided to go back to my goatee look. So that's the first thing to address. Not that anyone really cares, but yeah. But the second thing to address was last week I did top five point guards, and I feel like there was two players, especially one, that I kind of went back and looked at statistically and looked at their season, and I realized I didn't really do them justice by not even discussing them. My top five will still remain intact. My top five point guards, I'm not changing, but my honorable mentions are different. I'm Rondo and Drew Holiday, who were originally my honorable mentions. I'm kind of knocking them both off, and I'm going to put Damian Lillard and, more importantly, Kyrie Irving as my two honorable mentions. To be honest, those two guys had such great years, especially Kyrie, that the fact that I didn't even include him, I feel like was a little disrespectful to those guys. So I'm going on the record right now, going back a little bit, and not changing my top five, but changing my honorable mentions to Lillard and Irving, because those two guys, the year they had, definitely was better than Rondo's, and especially better than Drew Holiday's. So I just wanted to correct that. But that was last week's video. Now, today's video. Today's video, or this week's video, is my top five shooting guards. Now, the shooting guard position is beginning to change. It used to be a couple, even like 10 years ago, the primary focal point of a team's offense. Their number one scoring option. Now it's becoming more of a role playing position, especially with like Avery Bradley coming in and Tony Allen being a defensive player, things like that. It's becoming more of a role playing position, but there's still plenty of good shooting guards in the league. So let's go right to it. My honorable mention shooting guard. I really only have one. Now, there's a lot of guys you can argue here, but my honorable mention is Brooklyn own Joe Johnson. Now, Joe Johnson to me is not really should even be in a conversation of a top shooting guard. I think he's one of the most overrated players in the game. But just based off of all the big shots he made last season, all his game winners, he had, I think, three or four game winning shots. He had like four or five game tying shots. Obviously, he actually led the league in, I think, field goals made in the final 2 minutes of a game. Just on his clutch factor is why he's an honorable mention. Statistically, his 16 points and mediocre assists and rebounding to me does nothing for me of even me really considering him. Also, he kind of disappeared in the playoffs, even though I understand he had the foot injury, whatever that plantar's fasciitis or whatever the thing's called injury was. But really, he doesn't ever really come across in my mind as a really top shooting guard. However, just because of his clutchness is the only reason why I will go and include him as an honorable mention. So now let's go into a top five shooting guards. And my first one is Klay Thompson of the Golden State Warriors. Now, Klay, really, he's not that great, let's be honest. He kind of splashed onto the scene more in the playoffs, him and Stephen Curry. But, his 16.6 points and his over 40% three shooting percentage is pretty impressive. And that's really more or less the only reason why he's even on this countdown, number five. He's just a pure shooter and a really good one. And similar to Stephen Curry, who was, I believe I had him at number five of my point guards, he's kind of being plunged in right there as number 5 as shooting guard. So definitely part of a really great backcourt, but because the fact that he's just basically a shooter, he's only number 5. But because of how good of a shooter he is, he's in the top 5. So then, number 4 for me is Monte Ellis, who's most recently a Dallas Maverick now. Monte has always been one of the best scorers in basketball when it comes to getting to the basket and finishing. It was just a couple years ago he averaged over 25 points a game. And the biggest knock on Monte has always been the fact that he hasn't really been a big name player. He has never really taken his game to the next level. He's never been a go-to guy or anything like that. He was just really a scorer, and that's kind of the truth about him. He's 6'3", he's kind of undersized as a shooting guard, but he's really quick, and he averaged 19.2 points per game, 6 assists, and had 2.1 steals, which is pretty good. However, he's not really a good defender, so don't I know it's kind of weird because when you have a good number of steals, you think you're a good defender, but really he's more of like a all or nothing type of defensive player where he's either going to steal the ball or let the guy overpower him. So he's not the greatest defender, but really offensively he is probably one of the best scorers in the league. Definitely a top 5 scorer. So I put him as a number 4 ranked shooting guard just because of his great scoring ability. So now that brings me to number 3. Now, my number 3 and number 2, I've been fighting back and forth of exactly who should be 3 and who should be 2. And it was really tough, but my number 3 ranked is Dwayne Wade. Now, Dwayne Wade, I wanted to try to put as number 2, but my inner hatred towards him and LeBron James and the Miami Heat made me put him at number 3 because, I feel like he shouldn't be rewarded for ultimately a coalition that kind of has basically destroyed the whole league since then. So I put him as number 3. He averaged 21.2 points per game, 5.1 assists, 5 rebounds, had a player's proficiency rating of 24.09. A really solid player. Actually, honestly, if LeBron wasn't on that team, he'd probably be averaging closer to 25 points a game like he did before, and really would be more of a great player. And if LeBron wasn't on the team, he'd probably be my number 2, if not arguably number 1 ranked shooting guard. But because LeBron's there and takes it away from him, he's only number 3. But let's be honest, Dwayne Wade is definitely one of the best players in the game, even in his deteriorating state where he keeps on getting hurt and he's getting up there in the years. When I say up there, I mean he's 31, 32. But the way he plays, that's kind of old. But there's nothing more else to say about him other than the fact that he could be higher if he wasn't with LeBron, but he's still number 3 because 21.2 points per game is pretty good, and he shot 52% from the floor, which if you remember from my last video, anytime you're a guard and you shoot 50%, that's really really good, and so that's kind of shows you the efficiency of Dwayne Wade. So, but he's number 3. So number 2, the guy who I was battling back and forth with Wade is James Harden. James Harden came onto the scene last year and really emerged as a star player. He averaged 25.9 points per game, 5.8 assists, 4.9 rebounds, player efficiency rating at 23.1. Kind of gave it to the Thunder for trading him. But the thing about Harden is how great is he? I don't really know because he was the best player on the Rockets, and the Rockets, as we know, before now they got Dwight Howard, wasn't that great of a team, even though they did make the playoffs as the 8th seed. But I think James Harden's really showing though that he is definitely there's the top 3, in my case top 2 shooting guard in the league with his ability to score. And he really is one of the most complete scorers. He can shoot the 3 ball really well. He can shoot the mid-range jumper. He can travel and get to the basket, which we all know is what you need to do if you want to be a scorer. He can really do it all offensively, and that's kind of the reason why he's number 2, because he's just that good of a scorer and that good of a player. So he's number 2. And that leads me to my number 1 ranked shooting guard, which once again, this one is basically not up for debate, as well as my small forwards will be next week. Kobe, the Black Mamba Bryant, you have to put him as number 1. it does. I don't know how you can't. He's 27.3 points per game last season, 6.0, well, 6 assists, and 5.1 rebounds. Player efficiency rating 23.10. Shot 46% last year. At the age of 34, what more could you have wanted from Kobe? He single handedly carried those Lakers last year, not Dwight Howard. Dwight Howard, anything was a disaster. He single handedly carried the Lakers into that run that made ultimately had them make the playoffs, even though he did. And in the process, he ruptured his Achilles doing so. And honestly, I don't think there's any shooting guard better than Kobe. He's the closest player to really be the way the old shooting guards were back in the Jordan era, where the way shooting guards are supposed to be the primary scorer. He's the closest player to that. He really is the best shooting guard. He's a great defender, a great leader. Yes, he takes a lot of shots, but he kind of has to. And I don't think there's any doubt in anybody's mind that Kobe is definitely top shooting guard in the game. I don't really see anybody arguing that, and if you do, I think you're really dumb. So that's that though. That's why Kobe's number one, and Kobe will always be number one for a long time in when it comes to shooting guards. And he's definitely somebody you can argue is a top five shooting guard to ever play the game. But that's a whole other story. So until then, uh, that's it. That's my top five shooting guards in the league. Um, you can argue a few other people if you want to try to think that J.R. Smith or Jamal Crawford might want to be, at least honorable mentions or something. That's up to you. You can do that if you want, but I don't like those guys because they're pretty one-dimensional. But that's my top five shooting guards. So that concludes today's video. Next week's video will be my top five small forwards. And spoiler alert, LeBron James is in my top five. Oh my God. But anyway, this is NetsBoy, signing off.